7 days. That is all that separates the world from the opening kickoff of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. 7 days from the moment when Mexico walks out at the Azteca Stadium and the largest football tournament in history officially begins. And right now, with 1 week to go, something extraordinary is happening. Countries are pushing back. Fans are refusing to be silent. Protests are breaking out in host cities. A qualified nation is at war with one of the host countries, and the continent of Africa is being openly asked to rise up and walk away from the tournament entirely. This is not pre-tournament noise. This is a revolt, and it is happening in real time. Let's start on the streets of Mexico City, because what is unfolding there right now is something nobody planned for, and something FIFA has no power to stop. 8 days before the World Cup opener, mass protests erupted across the Mexican capital. Teachers from the country's National Education Workers Union took to the streets, blocking major avenues, shutting down routes used by millions of daily commuters, and marching toward the city's central square under a banner that read, "If there's no solution, the ball won't roll." Retired judges joined them. Road closures created chaos across a city already under enormous pressure from last-minute construction work. Mexico City is supposed to be the venue of the tournament's opening match, Mexico versus South Africa at the iconic Azteca Stadium on June 11th. And 1 week before that historic moment, its streets looked less like a festival and more like a city in open defiance. These protests, the unions made clear, were not specifically about football. They were about wages, pensions, and political grievances that the Mexican government had failed to address. But timing is its own kind of statement. With the world's cameras pointed at Mexico City, these workers chose this exact moment to say that the tournament's spotlight would not be used to paper over their struggles. They warned the government that protests could intensify, and FIFA, sitting in its glass tower, had absolutely no mechanism to respond. But that was only the beginning of what is pushing back against this tournament. If you want to stay with this story every step of the way, through every protest, every political confrontation, every moment that defines this World Cup before and after the first whistle, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. We are covering every layer of this tournament, and the layers run very deep. Now, let's go to Africa, because the conversation happening across that continent right now is one of the most morally serious discussions in the recent history of international sport. 9 African nations qualified for the 2026 World Cup: Morocco, Senegal, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Cape Verde, and South Africa. Together, they represent the full breadth and depth of African football, a continent that has produced extraordinary players, extraordinary moments, and an extraordinary passion for the game. And a growing coordinated voice across that continent is now saying that all 9 of them should stay home. The argument being made is pointed and historical. Africa's political memory, its advocates argue, carries a specific understanding of what it means to use sport as a moral instrument. In 1976, more than 20 African nations withdrew from the Montreal Olympics in protest of apartheid South Africa's continued presence in international sport. It cost those countries enormously. World record holders forfeited their chance at Olympic glory. Empty lanes and abandoned tracks replaced what had been promoted as a global celebration. But those nations concluded that participation would have given comfort and respectability to a regime the world should be condemning. The lesson they drew was this: boycotts come at a cost. They demand sacrifice and political courage, but sometimes that cost is worth paying. The parallel being drawn to 2026 is explicit. African fans from multiple qualified nations faced $15,000 visa bonds simply to apply to entry into the United States. Nationals from countries across the continent were caught in travel bans affecting 39 nations. Human rights organizations issued travel alerts to Florida and other American host states, warning of risks of arbitrary detention. And all of this, the advocates argue, is happening while FIFA's president sits in the Oval Office posing for photographs with the World Cup trophy and awarding the host nation's president something called the FIFA Peace Prize. For the African Union, for the Confederation of African Football, for the political leaders of qualified nations, the formal call was clear. A coordinated withdrawal by all 9 African teams would immediately destroy the tournament's claim to global inclusivity. Corporate sponsors, who have paid billions for the right to associate themselves with a festival of unity, would be forced to confront questions they have spent years avoiding. The tournament would lose something it cannot buy back with marketing campaigns or press releases. And that's where things became even more complicated. Because Africa is not alone in this revolt. Europe's revolt has been louder, more politically specific, and, in one case, more legally dangerous for FIFA than anyone initially anticipated. A group of 25 British members of Parliament formally tabled a motion urging global sporting authorities to consider excluding the United States from hosting the 2026 World Cup until it demonstrated compliance with international law. 25 elected representatives of the British Parliament, not activists on social media, not anonymous petitioners, sitting members of Parliament, formally on the record, calling for the host nation to be stripped of the tournament. That motion was filed on January 6th of this year. It did not succeed in moving forward, but its existence tells you something about how seriously European political institutions were taking this moment. In the Netherlands, a public petition calling for the Dutch national team to withdraw gathered more than 163,000 signatures. The hashtag #BoycottOrangeUSA trended across Dutch media. At Bundesliga matches in Germany, fans in the stands chanted "Boycott Trump Cup" loud enough for television microphones to pick it up clearly. A senior vice president of the German Football Association publicly invoked the Cold War boycotts of the 1980 Olympics, comparing the moral stakes of 2026 to the most politically charged moments in the history of international sport. A French parliamentarian warned that participation risked legitimizing policies he argued were dismantling international human rights standards. A Spanish government official raised the possibility of withdrawal. None of the major European federations officially endorsed a boycott. France's sports minister said there was no desire for one. Germany's federation ruled it out. But here is the critical point that gets lost when people report that the boycott movement failed. The fact that these conversations had to be formally shut down rather than never arising at all is itself a historic development. These federations didn't dismiss the idea as absurd. They considered it seriously, debated it publicly, and then decided, narrowly, carefully, that the costs were too high. That is a very different thing from a movement that never gained traction. Subscribe now and stay with us through every development in this tournament. This is the most politically charged World Cup in the modern era, and we are not going anywhere. Then there is Iran, the story that no precedent in World Cup history can adequately prepare you for. Iran's Football Federation president formally notified FIFA that Iran intended to boycott its matches on American soil, after several top officials, including the federation president himself, were denied U.S. visas ahead of the World Cup draw. Only 4 members of the Iranian delegation, including the men's national team head coach, were granted entry. The Federation president described the visa denials as a non-sporting act that left Iran with no choice but to withdraw from the draw proceedings. FIFA was formally notified and promised to look into the matter. Iran continued to prepare for the tournament and insisted it would not withdraw from the competition entirely, but made equally clear it would not play on American soil. Iran's scheduled group stage opponents are Belgium, Egypt, and New Zealand. All 3 matches were originally assigned to venues in the United States. Iran formally requested relocation to Mexico. Mexico's president said her country would be open to hosting. FIFA said it was committed to the original schedule. That standoff between a nation at war with the host country, a governing body unwilling to move, and a co-host nation willing to step in, remains unresolved as the tournament enters its final week of preparation. It is, without question, the most diplomatically extraordinary situation any World Cup has ever faced before a single ball has been kicked. And connecting all of these individual revolts, Iran's refusal, Africa's moral call, Europe's political fury, Mexico City's street protests, is a single defining failure of institutional imagination. FIFA awarded this tournament to 3 nations in 2017 with a vision of North American unity, economic power, and football festivity. They could not have anticipated a war between the host country and a qualified participant. They could not have predicted the specific political environment that now surrounds this tournament, but they could have and should have built mechanisms to respond when the world changed around them. Instead, FIFA has offered confidence, it has offered reassurance, it has offered photographs in the Oval Office and speeches about the unifying power of football. It has positioned its president as a figure who moves between heads of state with the ease of a diplomat, while the fans those heads of state represent ask increasingly uncomfortable questions about whether this tournament was ever really built for them. 7 days from now, Mexico takes the field at the Azteca Stadium. The match will be played, the goals will be scored, the tournament will proceed. But the revolt that surrounded its preparation, from the streets of Mexico City to the parliaments of Europe, from the football federations of Africa to the diplomatic offices of Tehran, will not simply disappear when the opening whistle blows. It will sit in the stands, it will echo in the empty hotel rooms, it will be carried by the fans who stayed home, the supporters who couldn't get a visa, the players who were asked to compete in a country at war with their own, and it will follow FIFA long after the trophy is lifted on July 19th. The question every serious football fan needs to be asking right now is not who will win this World Cup. It is something far more important. When the world's most beloved sport is used as the backdrop for power, profit, and political maneuvering, and when the countries and fans who make that sport what it is rise up in revolt, what exactly is the World Cup still celebrating?